This is the first lesson on linear programming. The topic is linear equations, looking at how to write relationships between two variables in a linear way, straight lines. We'll look at it as a scenario. We're walking down the street and we see a bike rental kiosk, and the sign at the front says it'll cost you $15 up front to rent a bike, and we'll also charge you $5 for every hour you use the bike. What we want to do with that information is transform that relationship that's described in words into an equation. In this case, it'll be a linear equation. Linear equations are going to describe relationships between two variables. And when we graph these relationships, which we'll do in the next lesson, they'll have a straight line or linear relationship. For the bike rental kiosk that we're talking about, first thing that we'd need to do before we try and write an equation to describe that relationship is to define the variables, which are the quantities that will change depending on each other. What that means is, if I asked you, how long can I rent the bike for? You'd say, well, it depends how much money you have. If I asked you, how much does it cost me to rent the bike? You'd say, it depends how long you want to rent it for. So we can see that there's two quantities that clearly depend on each other, which are the cost of renting the bike and the time. So I'm going to define these variables by saying, let C be the cost and let T be the time. I need to make sure that my variables have dimensions as well, or units. So the cost of the rental is going to be in dollars, and the time that we're renting for will be in hours. This will be important when we start substituting values in, making sure that we're substituting in with the right units. I also need to list the parameters, so another new word, the quantities that do not change, and it's basically listing the information from the question. So the parameter would be an upfront fee is 15, and the hourly fee is $5. That might seem straightforward for this sort of problem. Later on in the term, you'll be looking at problems where the information will be hidden in a big paragraph, and it might be a little bit more difficult to find the parameters. Okay. The final part of the problem is to write an equation for the relationship between the two variables. I want an equation that's essentially C equals something to do with T. Some way of expressing the cost depending on the time that I'm renting the bike for. Since I know this is going to be a linear equation, I'm pretty sure that it's going to end up looking something like y equals mx plus c. You might be able to write down the equation straight away. I would probably guess and check. I would think, well, if I'm renting it for 1 hour, what's the cost going to be? So I'll think 1 hour, well, it'll be 5 times 1, because I'm only renting it for 1 hour, and it's $5 per hour, plus 15 to get me a cost of 20. What happens if I'm renting it for 2 hours? Well, the cost will be 5 times 2 plus 15. The hourly rate times 2 plus 15, which would give me $25. But the relationship I really want isn't for 1 hour or 2 hours, it's for T hours. If I wanted to rent it for T hours, the cost would be, well, it was 1 times 5 for 1 hour, 2 times 5 for 2 hours. This will be 5 times T plus 15. Hopefully you can see, if I highlight, when T equals 1, the 1 was there. When T equals 2, the 2 is there. When it's just T hours, the T goes in there. So my relationship between the two variables will be that the cost equals 5T plus 15. In general, you can think of this as the per hour rate, and this is some initial charge, if that helps out. So once we have this equation written, and we know the relationship between the two variables, we can answer some of these sorts of questions. So for example, how much would it cost to hire the bike for 4 hours? What this is really asking me is find the cost C when the time is 4 hours. So I'm going to substitute t equals 4 into the equation. The cost will therefore be 5 times 4 plus 15. The cost is $35. And since I was asked the question in words, I'll give my answer in words as well. It would cost $35 to hire the bike for 4 hours. It might seem pretty straightforward. Why did we need the equation at all? In these other types of examples, it's a lot easier to use the equation. For example, how long could the bike be hired for $40? What this is asking me is for me to find T when the cost C equals 40. So I'm going to be substituting C equals 40 into that equation. So up here, whenever I see C, I'm going to write 40. And then I can go ahead and rearrange. So minus 15 from both sides. And then I can divide by 5. Okay, 5 hours is my answer. Again, I'll make sure that I write this as a sentence. The bike could be hired for 5 hours with $40. So from here, you can have a go at these questions to practice that skill. It's really important that we get a hang of writing these linear equations and being able to substitute in for both variables.